welcome back for another month of exciting movie reviews. I'm your guest host, Danielle Findlay, and I'm here with Brent Marchant, but we're having some huge technical difficulties, so I apologize. I can't see Brent, and we don't know why.
Oh,
So,
The Invisible Man was always one of my favorite movies. So I thought I'd just play the role today. So,
okay, well, you're not going to be able to see much of our faces today because I'm just going to go to the movie posters because, or else my face is just on here and your voice, which seems a little bit odd. So I apologize for this, but, we live in a world of technology. So I don't know what's going on, Brent. I do apologize because I love our little conversations each month, but I wanted to make sure that this was getting posted anyways. And hopefully next month we've got things cleared out. I don't know if it's a Zoom issue. I don't know if it's my issue. I don't know. But we're gonna proceed. We are troopers, and we're gonna make this work. So Brent Marchant is a film critic, a blogger. He's written 3 books, and BrentMarchant.com. Please check out because he's got some really great things upcoming. He is such a knowledge and has a passion for movies, and I'm so thankful that you get to join me for another month talking about 6 great films. So yeah, thanks. Welcome back for another month, Brent.
my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Okay, I'm gonna are you ready? Let's proceed. Let's start. This is a very odd one today. Okay, so the first one, let's talk about the first one.
Okay, the first movie we have today is the movie Spencer, which is the latest film from a Chilean film director named Pablo Larraín. He's known for doing movies about character studies of women. And in this particular case, his subject has been Princess Diana. Now, this is a film that's been drawing kind of mixed reviews from critics and viewers, probably because I think it's not the movie they were expecting. This director has a tendency to do movies that are more character studies than straightforward biographies. And I think maybe a lot of critics and fans may have been expecting more of the straightforward biography, but that's clearly not the case. This movie is set in 1991 over the Christmas holidays, and it's at a time when Charles and Diana were already on the outs as far as the future of their marriage was concerned. And she was feeling a lot of pressure in terms of fitting in, living up to the role that was expected of her. She was known for having her own set of issues, such as eating disorders and some psychological issues. But she always managed to turn on the right image publicly, but personally her life was kind of a mess, and she was trying to figure out how she could properly adjust her circumstances, figure out ways to try and fit into a family that obviously was not happy with her, and it caused a great deal of stress on her, and this movie brings all of that to light. And I think another reason why viewers and some critics haven't liked this is the fact that we're seeing Diana as a human being in this film, somebody who's got flaws, somebody who has issues to resolve, and not as the so-called people's princess that she was basically known for publicly. So as a result of that, we see kind of a warts and all portrayal of Diana in this film. And I think maybe because of that, it's not what people wanted, it's not what people expected, and some have been turned off. But personally, I appreciated the fact that it was being so honest in terms of its portrayal. She's a character very much to be sympathized for because she had all these things that she was dealing with, and she didn't quite have the tools to know how to deal with it, how to respond to it. This director is known, as I said, for doing character studies of women who have gone through challenges. His most recent film prior to this in that vein was Jackie, which came out several years ago and was the story of Jackie Kennedy after the assassination of JFK. And this film in many ways reminded me of that, in the fact that it was showing a woman who was well known and had many remarkable talents and abilities, trying to cope with circumstances that were in many ways almost beyond what they were capable of dealing with. So as long as people understand the intent behind the way this film was made and what the director was going for, I think they'll find that they really enjoy it. I certainly did. I mean, I have to admit, this wasn't really the movie I was expecting to see going in. But again, when I look at this filmmaker's track record, it's very much in the same vein of other works that he had done previously. And on that score, he definitely, I think, did a great job with this. Now, there are a few things about it that personally I would have done better. There are a few scenes that are maybe a little too melodramatic. There are also a few scenes in which some of the symbolism that's being presented to try and illustrate what her circumstances were like, the symbolism is sometimes a little bit heavy-handed, a little obvious, but given everything else that the film has to offer, I was able to overlook that and just say, this is a really well-made character study, and it's certainly worth watching, worth exploring, especially for the lead performance by Kristen Stewart as Diana. She is just absolutely outstanding. And it's no surprise after watching this film to see why she is currently being considered the leading contender to win the Oscar for Best Actress. I mean, she is that good in this movie. So with those caveats, I would say go see it. As long as people have a proper understanding of what the intent is here and how it was made and why it was made the way it is, I think people will enjoy it.
Well, I'm really excited. And I was going to ask you about Kristen because I wasn't really sure about her as the portrayal of Princess Diana. I do have a couple questions though. What did the Spencer family, have they made comment, or were they aware of this, or were they completely separately? Was the royal family completely, I mean, obviously they're not going to be part of it and being right there, but has anybody on that side really put their hand up and said that this is real too, or the best understanding of what happened, or put their hand up to say absolutely not? Has there been any controversy or anything said on the other side?
I haven't specifically heard anything. I mean, the royals tend to be,
very tight-lipped,
tight-lipped and reluctant to speak about these sort of things. And the other thing too is I think it's important for viewers to understand that the film states right up front that this is a fable about a tragic. Okay. And that appears like in the very almost one of the first images of the film. It's a little electronic graphic that appears at the bottom of the screen. So this is clearly a work of speculative fiction.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect.
So, but it's maybe they should have made that point a little bit stronger, because I don't know if that's the reason why people have reacted to it the way they have negatively at times, because maybe they misunderstood it. Maybe they didn't catch the significance of that. I mean, as I said, the director sort of did the same thing with Jackie Kennedy and didn't put any kind of disclaimer about that up front. So maybe they felt the need to add that this time was important, but it still maybe didn't resonate with viewers and critics as thoroughly or as importantly as it probably should have.
No, and that's a good point, because when I'm always reluctant when I see or hear of movies that have portrayed somebody who I have my own based on only the information that I've been fed through, social media or media in general, and the lives of or stories of. So I just really appreciate the fact that, it was stipulated that this is, it's the truth you take from what you want to take from it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. But the other thing too is that there's been a lot of speculation that Diana sort of saw what was coming for her down the road. Oh,
really?
I mean, and this film kind of addresses that a little bit in terms of showing a connection that she seemed to feel to Anne Boleyn, King Henry VIII's wife, who was beheaded. I think she felt that she could see the writing on the wall with the way the family was treating her and what that might mean for her down the road, regardless of what the actual outcome of that might have been. She certainly seemed to sense that at some point she was going to be on the outs. She was going to be handed her hat. And again, that was another one of the issues that she didn't quite know how to deal with, because there was this tremendous buildup over the marriage and over her public role and everything. And all of a sudden she was going to be this pariah. And, she didn't quite know how to approach that or how to handle it.
It was so sad. What a tragedy. Honestly,
Really
I have a lot. Yeah. I just feel really sad for the boys, and I feel really sad for, the people who just admired her and for the work that she did. She was just she was very angelic, and she was just such a special lady. And it's just very tragic what had happened.
There's one thing this film has a lot of. It has a lot of her interaction with the kids.
Oh,
and yeah, actually, it's really quite interesting. I wasn't expecting that either. But after watching this and after seeing what she had to deal with this family, I kind of came away from the film saying to myself, it's understandable how Harry wanted to get out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because he was very close to his mom. And I think he could sense what was going on to a certain degree, more so than his older brother. And when he came into his own as an adult later on, I think he probably looked at this and said, yeah, get me the hell out of this family. I mean,
yeah. And for his own reasons, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I got to say that the poster, like the movie poster, is stunning. It is so beautiful.
Absolutely.
And it really is quite an emotional. Like when I was looking at it, there's just such a sense of so much emotion. And I'm really thrilled that Kristen Stewart, that she's being noted, for the work that she did. That's really exciting.
Yeah, she was outstanding. I mean, in terms of the looks and the mannerisms and the vocal inflections, she has got all of that down pat. And there's one scene in the film where she's standing at the top of a staircase and it's filmed from underneath her. And in that very shot, when I was watching this, I swore that I saw Diana on the screen. That's how much she just.
Ooh, I just got shivers.
Just how much she escapes into the role, and so thoroughly as she does. I mean, and this, another thing to its credit is the film. It has some very biting humor in it at times too, in the fact that when Diana was beginning to finally feel her oats a bit, she didn't hesitate to speak her mind, and she comes out with some really, real zingers as one-liners.
That makes me happy. Good for her.
Yeah, I mean, I won't spoil it for the viewers, but there is one line that she gives as she's dressing for the Christmas Day dinner that is just absolutely hysterical. So.
Well, it's one that I didn't see because, again, I live in a small town. We don't have a theater, but I'm looking forward to this one when I can watch it, because I really admired and I adored Princess Diana, and her death was so untimely and just really unfortunate. And everything that has led up to that and everything that has been, spoken about after that with the royal family is really intriguing. Everybody, I think, is really quite intrigued by the royal family or royalty.
Well, one of the things I find it interesting, and it would make for an interesting movie double bill of Spencer and the movie that came out a little bit over a decade ago called The Queen with Helen Mirren.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see the reaction that the family has to Diana in that film, even after she died, they really didn't like her. And
it's terrible.
It really is. And I mean, this Spencer gives you sort of a preview of what is to come later on, as far as our reaction toward her. But the Queen really, drives it home and says, No, they they wanted to be done with her as quickly as they could. So
Mhm. That's terrible. Okay, let's wrap this one up. On 1 to 5 stars, how many are you going to give them?
I'm going to give this one a 4.
Good. I like
Yeah.
that. I look forward to watching this one. Okay, thanks for that, Brent. Okay,
Nope.
next.
Okay, so next we have a film that played briefly in theaters and is now available for streaming on Netflix called Passing. And this movie is based on a novella that was written in the 20s about the practice known as passing, which took place in the African American community at the time, where individuals who, particularly women who were of light-skinned background or mixed race background, in order to be able to enjoy some of the benefits that their Caucasian counterparts freely enjoyed, they would purposely dress and carry on the mannerisms of what was seen as being part and parcel of Caucasian culture in order to quote unquote pass, so that people would not be able to necessarily readily identify their ethnic identity. And this film tells the story of two old childhood friends who happen to run into each other. And the one, played by Tessa Thompson, is sort of surprised that her friend, played by Ruth Negga, looks and acts so differently from how she knew her when she was younger. But that's because she was a light-skinned African American and was able to successfully pass. So much so that her Caucasian husband didn't even know what her true ethnic identity was. Now, her friend, the character that Tessa Thompson plays, she was light-skinned enough also to be able to pass if she wanted to, but she was always a little troubled by that because she felt it was being dishonest, wasn't being true to her roots, wasn't being true to her people. Yet she would occasionally allow herself to do that if the need arose. And that particularly began to happen after she started having more frequent encounters with the childhood friend who she had run into, which left her somewhat conflicted about whether or not she should continue doing this and how she should behave, especially in light of the fact that she was quite active in terms of trying to promote civil rights for African Americans at the time. So it gets into a number of very interesting ideas, and where the relationship between the two of them is concerned. And also a big part of the reason why Ruth Negga's character is so intrigued by her friend's situation is that in the process of passing, she essentially had to give up almost all of her connections with the African American community to maintain this facade that she was carrying on with her husband. So she looked at this opportunity as a chance of kind of reconnecting with her background. And it almost starts to become a little too intrusive to the point where her friend is feeling sort of imposed upon. It's like, is she trying to take over my life? Is she trying to ingratiate herself to a degree that is more involved than I'm comfortable with? So it gets into an awful lot of very different areas in terms of where the ability to pass is involved, and in terms of just how acceptable it is and how they feel about it. So this is a very, very intriguing story. The performances by Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga are both fantastic. And this also marks the directorial debut by actress Rebecca Hall, who has done a really fine job as a director in her debut feature here. So this is a good movie. There's a few spots where it's a little slow, but overall, it's quite well done. It's beautifully filmed in black and white, and it has a terrific old-time piano background score to it. I think this is a movie that really is kind of a sleeper in terms of just how good it is and how well appreciated it is. Thankfully, it is on Netflix now, so people can catch it anytime they want, and it's worth a watch.
Oh, I loved it. I got to see it. I was so excited that I got to watch four of the six movies this month, which was great. I adored this movie. I first of all was not expecting it to be a black and white, and instantly I was like, brilliant. That's brilliant because
Yeah.
then it becomes it became colorless. It really
Yes.
did. But the portrayal of the lives that each ethnic group led, you know, being a black woman as a Caucasian woman. And it was hard. It was hard for me to watch. I got angry several times. And it's really, you know, there's just still that piece of me that has a really hard time with the history of our world. I have a really hard time with that. So it just made me really sad to see the advancements that this Caucasian woman, you know, a portrayal of a Caucasian woman got versus a black woman. And it was a black woman portraying a Caucasian woman, which was
Yeah.
fantastic. And these actresses are stunning. They did so good,
Yes.
Brent. I was just encaptured by their beauty and by their ability to really draw you into their lives. It was so well done. I adored it.
Yeah, I thought it was really a surprising little gem. I had not heard very much about this film before it came out. It was initially playing at film festivals, and then kind of true to what Netflix does with a lot of its releases, it had the brief theatrical run and then immediately went streaming. Um, but after seeing, I saw it in the theater when it was playing there, and it just really captivated me throughout. It's also interesting to know too about how Tessa Thompson's character had her ability to pass was kind of on the fence in many
Yeah.
ways because um, in terms of her skin tone, she could get away with it, but she was married to a husband who was very dark skinned.
Mm-hmm.
So her ability to try and go out and pass socially with her husband never would have worked,
So true. Yep.
you know? Um,
Like she went shopping, she did everything, and
yeah,
she was very well respected.
yep,
And then you know, Ruth Nega, no, yeah, her character, ooh, she was very troubled,
yes,
and she was very dark, and just the portrayal of something that this facade of something that she thought, but then you know, there's no judgment. That's what she wanted, and she wanted
exactly.
an easier, quote unquote, easier life. It was so beautifully done and so tragic. Like there was just so many. It was very simple, but yet there was little twists and turns of darkness and despair and tragedy and reality, a lot of realness to this that I really adored. It was really
Well,
good.
and also, you know, I had to kind of keep wondering while watching this film how her husband never caught on to it.
I know.
You know, I
And
mean,
he was great. He was such a jerk though. And I
yeah,
was mad at him. And I had to remind myself it's a character that he's portraying, but I was so angry because there were several times and I was like, well, I don't know that I can watch this. It was really made me quite uncomfortable. You know, there's those thoughts and beliefs and, um, you know, the way he expressed himself to an African American culture. And I just was like, oh, I don't, yeah. But, you know, that was his character. And I thought he did his character very well. And how she had to pretend, his wife had to pretend.
well, and also, I mean, we have to remember too that the movie was set in the 1920s,
That's it. Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
you know, a lot of attitudes were very different, and a lot of people were a lot less reserved in terms of expressing exactly what their true feelings were. So, um,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
true.
I mean, I mean, in today's culture, you can look at it and say, how could anybody think that way? But you know, that was a century ago, and a lot of the opportunities that the African American community has been able to avail themselves of since then just weren't in place at the time.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's the other thing too, is the fact that um, I think a lot of people sometimes have the impression that everybody in the African American community at that time was not well off economically, and that's not true. I
Ah,
mean, there were a lot of people in that time
good note. Mm-hmm.
who were professionals. They did
Mm-hmm.
very well for themselves. They could theoretically go out and afford all the same things that their Caucasian counterparts could. Yet, because of the way society was handling this issue of race at the time, they couldn't do it. They had to stay within the confines of their own community.
Good point, because both of those families were affluent.
Yeah.
He was a doctor, you know, and they, you know, and he provided, like, yeah, good point, because they both were very affluent, they built a very affluent family, or they came from, you know, and they built themselves, and they were very well educated, and they were very, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't, you're right. It wasn't like this, there was no hierarchy. They were the exact same, but yet one was trying to portray herself as a Caucasian woman, thinking that that got her a better life.
So yeah, this is one worth seeing. I recommend this one, definitely.
I agree. And again, the movie poster was so attractive, really well done.
And the tagline too, "Nothing is black and white," I thought was really just, it's simple, but it just nails it. Yeah,
I agree. Okay, how many stars are you going to give this one?
I'm going to give this one 3.5 to 4.
Okay, great. Okay, next.
Okay, so next we have a film that it's a Canadian production that is available for streaming in Canada. I wish it were available for streaming in the US, but it's not at this point. It's primarily been playing at film festivals, and it's called Jump Darling, which tells the story of an aspiring actor who's having landing parts, and as a result ends up becoming a drag queen as a way just to kind of get himself seen but it's not something that he seems to be overly enthused about, even though he seems to be quite good at it. But you know, his frustration with his circumstances, his frustrations with his partner, who is this very conservative, button-down corporate lawyer type who thinks he's being an embarrassment to both of them. It all kind of builds up to a point where he says, I've got to get out of here. I need to take a break from these circumstances and get my head together. So he leaves Toronto, where he's been performing, and decides to go to rural Prince Edward County, Ontario, to visit his aging grandmother, who's played by Cloris Leachman. And basically, it's a time for him to try and regroup and he enjoys. He's kind of a firecracker. Basically speaks her mind, not afraid to act out. She offers how to get your life together and so forth, much of which involves periodically taking a leap of faith. And that's essentially where the title comes from, Jump Darling. It's like making a reference to taking leaps of faith. And the question is, will he do that? I mean, picking up and leaving the way he did certainly was a leap of faith in itself, but the question then became, is he willing to take more leaps of faith in order to get his life on track and at the point where he wants it to be? So the film follows his story. It also follows the story of his grandmother, who is trying to stay as independent as she can. She's got a daughter, the young actor's mother, who is trying to move her into a retirement community that she doesn't want to go to. So there's a lot of drama going on, but it's all done very playfully. There's a lot of good humor in this film. It's a really another little charming little gem that really deserves a wider audience than it has gotten so far. I hope it will end up getting the wider audience, particularly since this was Cloris Leachman's last screen performance. She's absolutely outstanding in this part. I mean, you know, it's kind of unfortunate that for many performers, when they pass on, a lot of times their last work is not necessarily particularly memorable. But in this case, this is one of the finest screen performances that Cloris Leachman has ever given. And it was kind of gratifying to see that she went out after having done this as her last role, because she's really good in it. So I recommend this one as well.
Oh, I loved it. I watched this one too. I Cloris Leachman, it just was just heartbroken. She does so good in this movie,
She
and
really is.
knowing that it was her last movie was just really touching. She is incredible.
Yeah.
She just did a phenomenal job, and there was many things that were happening. Every character, because there really was only like main characters, there's only a handful, but
Yeah.
each one of them had such different, challenges, and like there's just an age, there's a generational gap and differences, but it was the relationship between a grandmother and her grandchild, and how he was in his own struggles, but yet he would have done anything for his grandmother
Yes.
at the end of the day. And then there's that controlling daughter. I'm going to put you into a home to make sure that you're safe. So she becomes that parent in that relationship. And to see how they all switch their roles within their relationships was just outstanding. I loved it. The music was incredible. I thought like everything about the movie was really, really well done. Cloris Leachman is just a gem. I just am so thankful that this was her role before her passing, that she can be known for the extravagant work that she did, including this movie.
Yeah, I really think this was probably the best screen performance she had given since she won her Oscar many years ago for The Last Picture Show. I mean, she's certainly done a lot of very memorable roles in the time since then, but in terms of doing a non-character character.
She's just the cutest. She's the cutest Nana. Like, she's just the sweetest. And she's got a mouth on her. And, I won't give it away either, but, there is the sense of her completion, yes, in her life. And I thought that Thomas Duplessis, is it? Yeah. I thought he was phenomenal as well. I thought he did an extravagant job and was just so good.
Well, and I also like the role played by the mother, Linda Cash.
Yeah.
I mean, she was a really kind of a eccentric sort of character in terms of being hard-nosed in so many ways, but then also being kind of out there in terms of her interest in astrology and other things, and working that in whenever she felt it was important to get it in, yes, even though it seemed to kind of go against all of these hard-nosed attitudes that she had in so many other ways.
Yeah.
So it was definitely really good casting. I was very impressed also in the fact that this was the debut feature from the director, Phil Cannell. I really look forward to what he has to come up with in future films, because this was certainly a very good start, and I think he's got a bright future of him ahead as a filmmaker.
Yeah, it was really good. I'm so saddened that we won't be seeing Cloris Leachman in future films, because all I kept thinking is, she was a true actor. She knew her lines, and you could actually see the relationships between the actors in the movie, yes, and her included. And I just felt for them all. I just really did, because they were portraying characters, but the relationship was obviously there, and they were all committed. It was really beautiful. I really enjoyed this one. Good pick.
Well, this was one of the films that I saw at the Reeling Film Festival back in at the end of September. And I think I left it off of last month's list of films that I recommended from the film festival. So, but I liked it enough that I wanted to make sure that it got proper attention. And like I say, you're fortunate enough up in Canada to be able to stream it. I hope that happens in the U.S. We'll see.
I hope so too. I hope for our U.S. counterparts that they're able to view this, because it's a treat.
So this one gets 3.5.
3.5. Okay. Yep. And then the next one.
Okay, so the next one is a movie that was very highly anticipated, and I have to give a very, very qualified review about this film. It's the latest film from the Marvel universe called Eternals, which basically tells the story of a group of superhero extraterrestrials who have been watching over humanity for a very, very long time. In many ways, this is kind of a fictionalized account of many of the things you see on like the Ancient Aliens TV series. The plot is very complex and involved, so I really won't get into all that. But the one thing about this film that sort of distinguishes it from the other films in the Marvel universe is the fact that this one seems to be more driven by character and relationship development than maybe a lot of its predecessors have, which is, I believe, part of the reason why they brought aboard Chloe Zhao to be the director of this film. She was the Oscar-winning director for Nomadland last year. Now, while it's true that she kind of gave the film her own spin, like a lot of her previous films, which are mostly small independent dramas, which have a slower pace and a more deliberate way of telling the story, in trying to apply that to a story like this just doesn't really work a lot of the time. I mean, I'm glad that they were trying to expand the scope of what these movies try and do. There are some excellent special effects in it. There is a lot of really good comic relief in it, but there were just, I found too many what I call hammocks in the story, places where the story sags between events. And it just sort of slows the pacing down and keeps it from really popping in the way that a movie like this typically should. Basically, it hits some of the right notes, but it misses on others. It's something that I think viewers have to take with a great grain of salt in many ways. I think a lot of the people who are big fans of the action adventure genre would probably be disappointed by this, because they might find that it's too slow in a number of spots. And also the fact that the movie is a little too long too. I believe it's around 2 hours and 45 minutes, something like that. And, you can only watch things explode so many times before you start kind of losing interest in it as well. So, and also the fact that, while I'm not playing spoiler here, I will say that it leaves a number of questions very open-ended, which obviously means there's going to be a sequel at some point, which that bothers me a little bit in the fact that the story doesn't feel complete. So, I would say to viewers who are interested in seeing this, kind of go see it at your discretion. And if you come away from it not liking it to the degree you might typically would of the other Marvel Universe movies, well, you've been forewarned.
But I'm a tad bit surprised that it made it on your list here. But I'm glad you're talking about it, because it was much anticipated for sure, and it's got a pretty solid cast. So, yes. But 2 hours and 45 minutes. Come on, Brent.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time. I mean, an hour and a half, movies back in the day only were an hour and a half. And then they just started getting longer and longer. And 2 hours, 45 minutes is no, I can't. And unless but that's really hard to engage somebody for that length of time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when it comes to a lot of the superhero movies, they can do that by, giving you the nonstop thrill ride, and that keeps your interest. But like I say, there are places in the story where it tends to sag, and you kind of sit there and watch it and say to yourself, okay, come on, get on with it already. Mm-hmm. I mean, even though you are doing some things that you typically don't see in a movie like this, where you see the relationship development and the character development, but it just doesn't mesh as well with the other material. The thing that I also find kind of interesting is I have to kind of wonder what this is going to do for Chloe Zhao's career. She's been on sort of an upward trajectory for a number of years, and Hollywood has just sort of been falling all over themselves over her work. Personally, I think she's okay as a director. I wouldn't say I think she's great. Um, and when she ended up winning the Oscar for Nomadland, it was sort of the kind of thing where, okay, she can probably write her own ticket now. And she wrote herself into a big budget film. And the question is, can you sustain the momentum that you've been building through all of your other works in something that suddenly is way outside the territory of what you typically done? And my answer to this was, in this case, no. So I have to kind of wonder where her career might be headed after this. It was in many ways, from what I had read online, Eternals is the lowest reviewed film ever in the Marvel Universe series, and there have been a lot of movies in that series. So that does not bode well. I mean, it's done well enough at the box office because Marvel's fans are so loyal that they'll pretty much go see anything.
Yeah.
Personally, I tend to pick my Marvel movies a little more judiciously. And for my money, this one just didn't quite cut it. So as good as there are, as good as some of the elements of the movie are, I have to give this a very qualified review and say that I would probably give it a 3.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me.
And that's being generous, I have to admit. So
okay, well, heads up. That's what you're here to do, is not lie. Give it to us straight. Okay, so the last one, let's talk about that one.
Well, no, we've got 2 more.
Oh, we've got 2. How come I only have 1? Oh, no, you're right. We've got 2 more. I apologize. Yep.
No
okay.
problem. No problem. Okay, so our next movie is a little Irish independent comedy drama called The Last Rite. And this is a movie that it was delayed in terms of its release because of the pandemic. And I think the picture disappeared.
Yeah, I'm going to get it here.
Okay.
Bear with me for 1 second. Okay. And share.
So this tells the story of an Irish-born lawyer who's living in New York, who learns that his mother passes away, and he needs to go home to Ireland to take care of the arrangements for her funeral and so forth. So while he's on the plane, he ends up meeting a guy, an elderly gentleman, and they strike up a conversation. And they talk about the reasons for going to Ireland. He mentions that he's going to Ireland to bury his mother. And the old man says that he's basically doing the same, except that he's burying his estranged brother. So they kind of compare notes a little bit. And during the course of the flight, the old man dies. But before he dies, he writes into his passport that the young man sitting next to him is his next of kin. And he basically does that because they share the last name and he has no other living relatives. So as the so-called next of kin, he's responsible for making sure that he's buried according to his wishes. And the lawyer is like, I have no idea who this guy is. I just met him on the plane. And that sets off this just absolutely madcap adventure of trying to get this situation taken care of properly. When he arrives in Ireland, he ends up going on this road trip from Southern Ireland to the very northern part of the island where the old man wanted to be buried next to his brother. And the road trip in between is just full of adventures involving his younger autistic brother, a young woman who tags along who had worked at the funeral home taking care of his mother, and also an aggressive cop who's trying to figure out why he may have stolen the body of this older man. And just one thing leads to another. Everything keeps getting complicated and blown out of proportion. So this is kind of a road trip buddy movie, tale of miscommunications all sort of wrapped into one. And it's quite delightful, funny, charming. I was expecting it to be a little more humorous than it was. There's more drama in it than I was expecting, but still in all, it's a fun little movie. I'm glad to see it finally got released, that it was able to overcome its delay caused by the pandemic. And in the US, it's gone straight to cable and streaming, particularly on the Showtime network. So if you want to see it, you can either catch it when it's playing on cable TV or through the Showtime streaming website. Fun movie, definitely worth the time.
Oh, it is fun. It was so good. And having traveled Ireland several years ago, I just was encaptured with memories of my own journey. Nothing like this, of course, but just the humor and the way that the Irish speak. Like they just got me. And I loved the cast. I thought it was a really, really well put together cast. I really enjoyed this one. It made me chuckle for sure. And there was some, not surprises, but some things that happened where you're like, oh, okay, this just kind of adds to the movie a little bit. And it was really lighthearted, literally, they're just driving from, like you said, Southern Ireland to Northern Ireland and everything they encounter along the way. And it just, I thought it was quite, like you said, it was quite delightful and very endearing. It was very sweet.
But the surprises are one of the things that really make the film work, because that's where a lot of the humor comes from. I mean, the unexpected developments are quite funny. I mean, so that was a nice little twist in terms of the screenplay, the way they worked that material in there. Again, when I watched the trailer for this, I was originally supposed to see this at a film festival in March of 2020, and it got canceled because that was right when the pandemic started. And when I saw the trailer, I thought, well, this looks like a hoot. And as I say, it is funny, it is charming and endearing and humorous, but the trailer does make it look like it's a bit more madcap than it really is. Yeah. So that's one thing that I would definitely caution viewers on, to like understand that there is more to this than just laughs aplenty.
Yeah.
And that's actually indicated in the title of the film, The Last Rite, and the way the word right is spelled. I mean, it's making a reference to doing the right thing as opposed to the ritualistic term RITE. So, but this was a joy.
It was a really nice treat to watch. I'm glad you picked this one, because I had some chuckles and some giggles, and it was heartfelt in the end. It was a feel-good movie. It was I think I watched it on like Sunday, and it was a perfect Sunday movie for me.
It definitely is a good like Sunday afternoon, rainy day kind of movie for sure.
Yeah, it was good.
So I would give this one 3.5.
3.5. Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now finishing off is a film that I will say right up front is a very difficult watch. This is a documentary about the prison riot that took place at Attica in New York in the early 70s. The reason why I picked this film is the fact that this is probably the most honest and unflinching depiction and chronicle of what happened at this event. It was the deadliest prison riot in US history. And a lot of what has come out in the time since it took place has been somewhat sanitized in terms of just how nasty the event was. Basically, the prison inmates took over a section of the prison, took hostages, were demanding certain improvements because they were being treated like crap. And authorities initially seemed to be willing to try to negotiate with them, but when certain events transpired, they just said, no, we're not going to do that. And they ended up retaking the prison in a siege that is far more brutal, inhumane, savage. I mean, I can't use enough words to describe how troubling the takeover was, and in terms of the way the prisoners were treated in the wake of the event, and also in terms of the way the government tried to spin the events using out and out lies about what really happened. For me, I grew up about 40 miles from Attica, so this was more than just a national story for me. This was a local story. This was in my own backyard. And even though there was a lot of local television coverage of the event at the time that it took place, even that, having that proximity to the event never brought out just exactly what went on and just how unspeakable the government's response was to this. It's the kind of film that, for me, it brought out the journalist in me again, where I felt, it's really important that the truth be known, even though, again, as I said right up front, this is a very difficult watch in terms of hearing about what happened and seeing the footage that was taken, that was much of which I don't believe was seen until before this movie came out. It's currently streaming on Showtime. Yeah, for those who are really interested in seeing social justice being done, it's definitely worth the watch. But again, understand that this is a hard one to see.
It's very hard. And this is probably why I missed this one when I was saying we had one more movie. I started it twice and I haven't finished it. It was really difficult. I was just floored, gobsmacked. Like I had no words. And very conflicted in so many instances. Like I probably got a good hour into it and then I was like, still can't. And I struggled through it. The second time was the longest time, but you know what? I'll give it a try again. I definitely want to watch it. I want to watch it to its completion, but it's not an easy watch for sure.
No,
it's like you said, it's in your back, and it was in your backyard. Like it's this is your community. I don't even know how have words to say. I'm speechless about this.
Well, when I decided initially when I wanted to be a journalist, I mean, I've always been one who's interested in seeing the truth. And there have been times when I've found that my willingness to see and experience certain things has probably been higher than maybe it is for a lot of other people. And when it comes to a film like this, I could see where people might have had the same kind of reaction that you had, where, they just couldn't watch it and had to turn it off.
Yeah.
But for those who have that kind of high enough tolerance level for being willing to look at the truth, no matter what it might be, this film is definitely worth it in that regard, because it really shows how unspeakable the government can be when it comes to the way it handles certain situations. I mean, yes, these people were criminals, but that doesn't mean that you treat them like dogs.
That's it.
And that was the point they were trying to make. I mean, they were intentionally doing things like withholding basic supplies like toilet paper and toothpaste, and they were intentionally feeding pork to the Muslim inmates. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not humane.
It wasn't.
It's just not humane.
It wasn't humane at all, actually.
No. And when you end up seeing the footage of the response where the authorities retook control of the prison, that's almost on par with the things you associate with what was going on in Nazi Germany. I mean, it's so utterly reprehensible to think that would happen. Now, again, people have tried to say, well, there have been some reforms since then and so forth, but I still can't believe that even in the time frame when this took place in the early 70s, that the authorities would stoop as low as they did in this country to handle a situation like this.
There was one of the times that I turned it off, an inmate was talking about how his head was split open by one of the guards.
Yes.
And then, and he was like bleeding. He said he was profusely bleeding, and the guard had him lean over. And you could see that where he's just with hope that he's going to be well taken care of, only to have it hit again, so that it split even wider open and then left. Yeah. To hear the inmate stories and their, recollection and their honesty about, what happened. And then it was one thing. And then, from a government perspective. And then there was the other side of it where, and it was just like, that really caught me was when one inmate was saying that there was no division or differences amongst the inmates at that point. Yes. It didn't matter what color your skin was. It didn't matter what culture. It didn't matter what your religion. It didn't matter anything. They came together collectively. And that was really empowering for me. That was a big thing for me to see how they came together and how, inmates were providing medical care for other inmates.
And the hostage. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and when you see the attitudes that they used in terms of the way they handled their dealings with the negotiators, and the way they handled their dealings with the hostages, they were far more civil than the people who were watching them as guards.
Yeah.
I mean, if they were that really perturbed by the things that have been going on, I mean, a lot of people would probably say, hey, we would have no problem with you being able to, go out and get your revenge in this, but they didn't.
They didn't.
Yeah. They didn't. They followed the procedures of civil disobedience, and it spoke volumes when it came to showing how they reacted in comparison to the people who were trying to bring the situation to an end.
Yeah, it was. I hope to get through it. I really do. It kind of reminded me of that same feeling. It was several years ago, and I think it was called The Cove. I think about the brutality it was Japanese brutality against dolphins. I think it was dolphins. Yeah. And again, there were so many people who could not watch what was happening during that. And it's instilled that kind of, again, this brutality. And that's kind of that same feeling that it reminded me of, was the brutality and the inhumanity of life. It didn't matter. I mean, in that instance of The Cove, it was an animal, like a mammal. It was a seeing creature. And in this instance is human life, but it was the still same disregard. Yes. Disregard for life. And like you said, basic needs.
Yeah.
It was terrible. Good pick, but terrible movie.
Yep. So I would give this one a 4.
Okay.
I mean, it's as I say, as difficult as it is to watch, I still think it's worth seeing if you are a strong advocate for social justice and the treatment of fellow human beings.
Yeah. It was that was a tough one. I will get through it. I appreciate that you've put this one on your list for sure. And you've got, out of the 6 that we talked about today, 2 of them got a 4, Spencer and this one. The lowest one was the Eternals. And then the other one's got 3.5. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
When we did last month's show, I ended up talking about a number of films that I had seen at the film festivals I was going to recommend. Mm-hmm. In the time since then, I've been streaming movies from the St. Louis Film Festival, but I'm going to hold off till next month before I give you my recommendations on those.
Okay.
Simply because I haven't finished streaming everything from that particular festival yet. So.
Okay.
But there definitely will be some films that I'll make mention of. And also, now that we're coming up on the holiday season, there are a lot of movies coming out that people should, definitely check out. One of them, it just opened this past weekend, called Belfast. It's the latest film from Kenneth Branagh. It's supposed to be very warm and fun. Next week we have the House of Gucci coming out.
Oh yes, with Lady Gaga. Yes, I
Yep.
want to see that one for sure.
We have King Richard coming out, the new film with Will Smith about the father of the
Williams sisters.
Williams sisters. We have an Australian Western called The Power of the Dog, which was directed by Jane Campion, who was the director who made the movie The Piano many years ago, starring Benedict Cumberbatch. We have Steven Spielberg's remake of West Side Story coming up. We have a new documentary about Julia Child called Julia, which is opening this coming weekend. What else do we have? And then there's a Netflix comedy coming out, I believe it's opening on Christmas Day, called Don't Look Up, which has got an all-star cast about it's a comedy about how people in government are trying to respond to an impending asteroid crash.
Okay.
So there really is a lot on tap. So we will probably have a lot of movies to talk about next month.
Okay, speaking of next month, because of the holidays, because of schedules and everything, Brent and I are going to be recording it, pre-recording it, and then we will make it live. Or not so make it live. We will post our review and our discussion, and we'll just post it on Facebook and on YouTube, of course. So it won't be live. That's correct, right, Brent? Is that what we're doing?
That's what we're going to be doing, and hopefully I'll be back on the screen by next month and be.
I know.
Invisibility will more.
Well, and you know what? Like this one was really like right from the video, right from me screwing up the day. I mean, it's Thanksgiving, so first and foremost, I want to wish you happy Thanksgiving and good health and good wealth and prosperity and all that really beautiful family, friends, togetherness of the holiday. And so next month, am I right? We were going to record it early, and then we were going to.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, and then we weren't going to do a live.
Yeah, and then we'll post it on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look for, just look for announcements of when it's going to come out. I wouldn't be surprised if we totally just make that one not happen, but we'll figure it out. But I'm looking forward to hearing about those movies as we move into the holidays. And then before you know it, it's the end of 2021.
Amazing, isn't that?
I can't even believe that we're already in November. That another year is coming to a close of movies and pandemic and life in general. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy. So I look forward to our next show for sure. Okay, so December, yes, Thanksgiving. You've got Thanksgiving upcoming, and I look forward to our next month.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, take care. Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate your flexibility and adaptability when we don't have video on you, but we made it work. And thanks for everybody who's watching or listening. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.